be optimistic with regards to some changes we can implement in the future, and India is such a great country with tremendous talents, especially in foreign. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good cooperation, and from you the youngsters will gain experience and materialize India's dream to win Olympic medals and general fitness and general evaluation and personality development through sports. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Hello and welcome to this session on realism. The Renaissance-inspired idealized painting tradition of Western art since 1400 didn't continue after the huge social change triggered by the Industrial Revolution. Works of art usually depicted from the viewpoint of those rebelling against the political oppression. England led the Industrial Revolution, which transformed the economies first of Western Europe, then of United States and other parts of the world from an agricultural to a primarily industrial base. Factories were established mainly in urban areas and people moved to the cities in search of work. New social class divisions arose between factory owners and workers. Demands for individual freedom and citizens' rights were accompanied in many European countries by social and political movements for workers' rights. Romanticism and realism were the art reactions to this social change. But realism rejected Romanticism's exotic themes and proposed the common society. The realist art movement flourished in France about 1840 until the late 19th century. It expresses an objective vision on modern life, the art truthfulness to the society. The 1848 revolution overturned the monarchy of Louis Philippe and developed during the period of the Second Empire under Napoleon III. This resulted in the fight for democratic reform and, as an effect, the realists democratized art by depicting contemporary subjects drawn from everyday lives of the working class. On the other hand, the invention of photography in 1840s made grew of the thought being realistic. Realism was based on the direct indulgence with the contemporary world. A manifesto entitled Le Réalisme by Gustave Courbet issued in his personal exhibition. Here quotes a statement in 1861 that painting is an essentially concrete art and can only consist in the representation of real and existing things. Realists painted for the regime of liberty parallel to the naturalist literature of Émile Zola, Honoré de Balzac and Gustave Flaubert. Socialist philosophies and politics of Pierre Proudhon and Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, published in 1848, coincided and influenced the realist thought. The same year, the first convention for women's rights was held in New York. The elevation of working class in the realms of high art and literature of the period recognized through the subject matter for realist artists. Those include the scenes of rural and urban working class life, street life, cafes and nightclubs, etc., which was general move away from ideal towards the ordinary. This spread to the Western art world and shocked the patrons of art, especially in France and Victorian art of England. Realism, as a highly political style, arose simultaneously with the Revolution of 1848. It showcased labourers and common country folk, groups that challenged the authority and privilege of the Parisian aristocracy and bourgeoisie and were in part responsible for the upheavals of 1848. Honoré Daumier. Daumier was born in Marseille in France. The works that made him famous was newspaper works, his lifelong flood of lithographs attacking the government, ridiculing lawyers, and generally deflating social and pretentiousness wherever he found it. Daumier exhibited his paintings at the salons of 1849 and 1850–51. But he was ignored, however. For the rest of his life, he painted privately, exhibiting only once more in 1877, the year before he died, at Durand-Ruel, a major commercial gallery in Paris. His paintings were therefore essentially unknown. In contrast to his commercial work, his oils are pure compassion. He dispensed with humor and satire, and relying on his caricaturist ability to concisely capture character and types, uncannily nailed the psychology of contemporary urban life. Daumier is alternatively labeled as a realist and a romantic, his paintings similarly combining realist subject matter with the powerful compassion of a romantic. In the work Freedom of the Press in 1834, the typographer stands his ground, fist clenched, while his political target falls. In the right background, the last Bourbon king, Charles X, has fainted and is being revived. Intentionally, and perhaps wisely, Daumier had not aimed this picture at the newly installed citizen king, Louis Philippe. The Republic in 1848 was one of the selected designs for symbolic image for Republic out of 100 entries. Artists were invited to submit designs of a symbolic image for Republic in February 1848, when Republic was proclaimed on the overthrown Louis Philippe. The design was monumental in feeling, which is a small oil sketch. The female allegorical figure of Republic suckling two of her children while another sits at her feet with a book. Daumier's plaster relief entitled The Emmrcs in 1848 to 1849 shows nude figures on the move, some with heavy loads. The year 1848 was one of the revolutions across Europe, one result of which was widespread emigration. He later did an oil painting with the same title, The Emigrants. This painting was a continuing part of the series of related works on fugitives that Daumier produced starting in 1848. It has an urgency that is quite different from the muscular march of the sculpture, but the dominant compositional motifs in both are the diagonal slant and the endless procession. Daumier also made many paintings and lithographs about artists, their exhibitions, and the studio. One is In the Studios, Fichter, Epatant, Sapristi, Caparli, which means wow, amazing, gosh, superb, it speaks. The superlatives issue from the mouth of a tall central figure, no doubt a connoisseur in his own mind. The responses of the other men are more varied. The man leaning into the picture with a pleasant look may be Daumier himself. In the third-class carriage, 1863 to 1865, he depicted the population growth of Paris during Napoleon III's reign, which was continuous and the conditions were hardest on the lower classes of the society. Daumier produced a lot of artworks in his lifetime, which includes paintings, lithographs, wood engravings, and sculptures. Jean-François Millet. Millet was born at Grouchy in Normandy, the other great realist painter. Although he painted peasants, Millet never condescended or prettified his subjects and was never sentimental. He was well educated and well read, and after choosing a career in painting and studying in both Cherbourg and Paris, he began by making portraits using a dark palette that inspired from his love of 17th century Spanish painting and Rembrandt. In the late 1840s, when back in Paris, he befriended several of the landscape painters of the Barbizon school, and in 1848 he produced his first peasant painting. Pictures of peasant life would be his specialty for the remainder of his life. In 1848, after an outbreak of cholera in Paris, Millet settled permanently in Barbizon. Unlike Courbet, Millet's realism depicts a timeless, non-specific, agrarian, anti-urban, and even religious nature of his subjects. L'Angelus, painted in 1859, depicts a man and a woman praying to the bells of Angelus, the church near their home. The peasants must work instead of attending church, but still make time to pray. The painting The Sower in 1850 shows a powerful figure precisely situated against a sloping horizon. He strides forward, filling the picture. The figure's casting of the grain probably refers to a biblical proverb. Another famous work by Millet is The Gleaners in 1857. The three women in the painting are performing back-breaking labor, but part of the story is also taking place in the background. There are hay wagons, people loading hay, and an overseer on horseback. This is the main harvest. This is what the landlord reaps. The women in the foreground reap only the chaff. Other works by Millet are The Angelus, Hunting Birds at Night, The Potato Harvest, Going to Work, Shepherdess Seated on a Rock, etc. Gustave Courbet. Courbet was born at Onans in southeastern France near the Swiss border. He traveled to Paris at the age of 21 and studied at the Atelier Suisse. Then he developed a powerful naturalism as his visual language. In the fall of 1849, Courbet returned to Onans, and there he painted The Burial at Onans, which was accepted at the Saloon of 1850–51. The picture was an affront to many viewers. It presented common provincial folk portrayed in a coarse, heavy form. The people of Onans, many of whom can be identified, posed for Courbet, and the artists not only documented their clothes and bearings, but their distinguishing facial features, which included bulbous noses, grotesquely wrinkled faces, and unkempt hair. The bleak, overcast landscape is equally authentic based on studies made at Onan Cemetery. Courbet's realism extends to the democratic presentation of the figures. Despite bold brushwork and a chiaroscuro vaguely reminiscent of his favorite artists Rembrandt and Velasquez, the picture has no Baroque drama and no compositional structure to emphasize one figure over another. The dog is as important as a priest or mayor. Courbet's realism through his art was democratic and socialist thought with political anarchism. Apart from painting, he wrote politically motivated essays and articles. Quoting him from his letter to a friend in 1850, "In our so very civilized society, it is necessary for me to live the life of a savage. I must be free even of governments. The people have my sympathies. I must address myself to them directly." He paints only what he could see. Painting titled The Stone Breakers in 1849, destroyed at Dresden, depict two anonymous peasants at hard labor. Proudhon, in fact, read The Stonebreakers as an irony directed against our industrialized civilization, which is incapable of feeling man from the heaviest, most difficult, most unpleasant tasks and the eternal lot of the poor. Burial at Onans in 1849 shows a transcript of the experience of the rural people of a corner of France distant from Paris, but the painting was made to be exhibited in Paris. The deep attachment of the French people to their individual regions is well attested and seems almost a mythical part of being French. Equality in the arrangement of pictorial surface can be seen across canvas. Another important painting by Courbet, known as the Artist Studio in 1854–55, however, fuller title is Interior of My Studio, a real allegory of 7 years of my life as a painter. Quoting his letter to a friend on the time he began the painting is that, "I am not yet dead, or realism either, for this is realism. In it are the people who thrive on life and those who thrive on death. It is society at its best, its worst, its average." His paintings include portraits, self-portraits, landscapes, nudes, and many others. Rosa Bonheur. Rosa Bonheur, a fourth realist exhibited at the Salon of 1850 to 51, who garnered considerable attention. She studied with her father, a drawing instructor and socialist who advocated full equality for women. From early on, Bonheur was determined to become a successful woman in man's world. Instead of making the small still lifes and watercolors traditionally associated with women, Bonheur became an animal painter who worked on a large scale. Rather than the exotic animals of the romantic world of Delacroix and Barret, Bonheur painted farm animals, including cows, horses, and sheep. Influenced by the scientific empiricism of natural history, she presented specific species, carefully studying each and accurately rendering them, often in minute detail. Bonheur began showing at the Salon of 1841. Rosa Bonheur's painting, The Horse Fair, shows her close study of the anatomy and movement of horses galloping, rearing, and parading. The realist qualities of her paintings are scientific observation. Bonheur dissected animals from butcher shops and slaughterhouses. In addition to the realist qualities of the horse fair, the thundering energy of the horses and the efforts of their grooms to keep them under control to have a romantic character. Likewise, the turbulent sky echoes the dramatic dynamism of the struggle between humanity and the untamed forces of nature. In 1848, Bonheur painted a large commission work from the new Second Republic to document French regional agriculture. Summary. The realist art movement rejected the idealized classicism of academic art and sensationalized romantic aspects of romanticism. Realism was contemporary, direct observation of the real events that were important to the artist's lifetime and glorified the working class in a natural, non-romantic way. The art of the time employed naturalistic visual language to express reality in the social life of human beings. Mainly, the realists created naturalistic elusive space of gritty details of real day-to-day life as subject matter in the paintings and lithographs. There are a few sculpture and architecture. This article deals with four of realism's practitioners, Gustave Courbet, Jean-François Millet, and André Daumier and Rosa Bonheur. Assignments. Analyze the term realism. Find out where and in which context it has been used in the history of art. Elaborate the quote by Gustave Courbet, "I paint only what I could see." Read Realist Manifesto written by Gustave Courbet. Discuss the historical importance of André Daumier's lithographs. Write about the success of a realist woman painter, Rosa Bonheur. Further reading. Janson's History of Art, The Western Tradition, by Penelope J. E. Davis, Walter B. Denny et al. In 2007. A History of Western Art, by Laurie Schneider Adams in 2011. The Social History of Art, Volume 4, Arnold Hauser in 1985. The 19th Century, edited by C. L. Ten, Routledge History of Philosophy, 1994. Introduction to Modern Europe, by Gary Tindrow in 1987. Realism, by Linda Nochlin, 1971. Realism and Tradition in Art, 1848 to 1900, by Linda Nochlin, 1966. Thank you for watching this program. We can meet again with another topic. Have a nice day.
welcome you all to the topic Differentiating Counseling. Introduction. Counseling is a caregiving practice which has many overlapping boundaries with other similar caregiving services. There are many misconceptions around this service that interfere with the effective utilization of it. While some of them relegate counseling to a simple technique which involves interviews, some others treat it as a complex process involving psychotherapy and treatment of serious psychological disorders and stigmatize the very process. It goes without saying that such misconceptions are highly unproductive. It is useful to distinguish the practice of counseling from other similar practices in terms of forms and function to arrive at a clearer picture of the uniqueness of this particular practice. The present chapter tries to juxtapose counseling with other practices such as interview, advisement, psychotherapy and teaching and tries to engage with the points of drawing and departure. The main source of misunderstanding is the similarity in the elements involved in all these services. We can see that except in teaching, all other services include one-to-one interaction where a person in distress is in face-to-face interaction with another who tries to help him or her. In that sense, all of them are situations defined by these three elements: the layperson, the expert, the problem. In all of them, the interpersonal relationship is developed as a result of the situation or the problem. All of them are geared towards the successful resolution of the problem. The structure and the goals of these services look similar on a first glance. So where does the difference emanating from? It needs an in-depth engagement with the goals and functions of these different services to understand the source of differences and the uniqueness of counseling service. Since counseling in generic sense is an integral part of the entire educational process, it is essential to come up with a refined meaning of counseling to differentiate it from related functions and to define the operations of those who serve in those functions. Another reason is that the very use of the term counselor to denote many functions. It is easy to find counselors of insurance to camps. So it is important to say what type of counseling we are discussing. Interview and advisement. Interview is a structured situation of human interaction. It involves a face-to-face encounter between two people where there is some consensus over the topic of discussion and there are some mutually agreed upon conventions on how to go about the conversation. It is employed in a counseling setting also. It is a very effective tool to collect data, but interview does not amount to counseling in its complexity and layered nature. Counseling is a larger process by which the individual is brought to an understanding and resolution of his problems. The interview is the actual face-to-face situation in which, through the medium of conversation, counseling takes place, hence the importance of conducting the interview along effective channels. Interviewing, however, is not wholly synonymous with counseling. In fact, counseling includes several other important techniques. Play therapy, for example, may be considered as counseling technique in which there is little or no interviewing. Conversely, the interview itself has number of uses which in the strict sense of the term cannot be considered as counseling. Employment interviews and newspaper reporting interviews are examples of such interviews. When compared to counseling, interview differs in three respects: at the level of intimacy, at the level of engagement, and at the level of skill required. Interview in that sense is the basic step where the contact is impersonal and what is elicited is only information and skills required are minimum. Many people can be assisted in the advisement situation for information giving and getting. The great majority of people who seek counseling will probably just need to clarification and encouragement provided in advisement. Regularly scheduled advisement periods with each pupil to provide an opportunity for preventing minor problems. In addition, such personal contact even on this level enables the counselor to keep informed with respect to the pupil's development. Advisement is more structured than either counseling or psychotherapy. The limits of time and facilities and perhaps skill of advisor demand more rigid curtailment of freedom of emotional release and intellectual explorations. The relationship can still remain impersonal, but the level of information processing is slightly different from that of an interview. It involves some interpretation of received information. This relationship is commonly found between teachers and pupil and in teacher-parent relations. It requires more skills than that is required on an interview. Psychotherapy and teaching. Psychotherapy requires professional training and skills in diagnosis and treatment of disorders. It is usually treated as a referral service where a situation demands further care and the demands of care exceeds the limits of what can be expected from a counselor or a teacher. Any teacher, advisor or counselor who attempts either final diagnosis or treatment of a behavior disorder which needs specialized help is guilty of unethical practices. What is specifically required of those who do counseling is the ability to recognize and to refer those who need professional help to those sources which can provide such help. Psychotherapy is one such service where increased levels of skill, specialization and complicity are involved. It usually deals with severe behavior maladjustment. To attend to this experience, the therapist must go through intensive training and supervised experience. It is usually conducted in clinical setting and the therapist requires recognition by professional associations. When all the caring giving services such as interview, advisement, counseling and psychotherapy are presented as continuum, we can see that they vary greatly in time, involvement and skills. As one moves from simple interview to psychotherapy, there is increased personal involvement on the part of those entering into this particular relation. The same observation is applicable to the case of skills and time required and other facilities. All of them increase as it moves from the one end of the continuum to another. A client is introduced to psychotherapy only with the reference from the counselor. In that sense, psychotherapy is one of the instruments used by a counselor as a means to an end. Referral to a psychotherapist does not mean the termination of counseling. Counseling will and should continue along with the psychotherapy. A counselor assesses the situation based on the given information on the client. This assessment is done with care and rigor. A counselor takes into account many factors that can lead to serious maladjustment of the behavior of the client. Most often, the referral to psychotherapeutic services comes with serious fears around stigmatization. Psychotherapy, unlike counseling services, happens at clinical spaces. It involves use of classificatory labels that can lead to stereotyping and other related problems. In most situations, the very mention of psychotherapy induces anxiety in the client and the immediate support system of client such as friends and family. In such situations, counseling process can be extended to family members where the counselor can explain the need and benefits of therapy to them. This would help increase the transparency of counseling services. Many studies on guidance in the educational settings have pointed out that the functions of counseling and teaching are identical. It is true that these two areas possess many qualities in common, but there still exist many basic differences which must also be considered in any appraisal of the problem. In this respect, we can say that many years of teaching experience does not make someone a good counselor. In order to become a good counselor, a person should be competent enough to understand individuals or in using the group as a means of personality development. But if someone uses counseling techniques intelligently and creatively, that person will grow personally and professionally along with his students. The following discussion tries to focus on the differences between teaching and counseling. Nature of the problem. Teaching serves as an expression of the will of the community in terms of a program of education for all students. Counseling, while also involved in these goals, is concerned with every pupil in terms of his personal development. Teaching is directed towards the imparting of information and skills prescribed by some standard board of education. While in counseling, the client is the key figure in determining what should be considered worthwhile in the process. The individuality of the student can be expressed better in counseling. Delegation of authority. The teacher in the classroom represents authority, even though ideally his role is that of a guide and a confidant. The counselor, on the other hand, neither condemns nor condones. He is not an authority figure. By principle, counseling should foster the decision-making capacity of the client. So here, the counselor is not making decision for the client, while the teacher is pushed sometimes to make a decision for the classroom. Teachers are also required to evaluate and report progress of the students according to the prescribed standards. On the other hand, counselor helps the person to evaluate himself. And even when a counselor uses some general recording devices such as case histories or cumulative records for the collection and recording of the data, these records will be highly personalized and won't be made public at any cost. Teaching is by definition regarded as a group function. Counseling, on the other hand, is invariably an individual function. Teaching may sometimes tend to overlook those who vary from the norm because it is concerned with the overall functioning of the teaching. It is just these persons who vary from norm with whom counseling so urgently concerned. At this point, teaching and counseling can be juxtaposed as two facets of guidance in education which go in opposite direction. Teaching is a planned function both in terms of prescribed curriculum and course of action. Counseling, while it is too a structured procedure, depends upon the client's progress and needs for its direction. Counseling is more open-ended in that sense, and there is more room for creativity. Understanding counseling. All the above discussion is helpful to understand the difference between different psychological services that look seemingly similar. This discussion also throws light on the shifting contours and varying viscosity of counseling services. What exactly is counseling? The above discussion is helpful to understand what it is not. But now the discussion focuses on the question, what is counseling, and it is done against the backdrop of the given definitions of all these services. The process of counseling as a means for modifying behavior is most fully expressed in its preventive developmental aspects. No matter how counseling is construed, its purpose is that of helping each people interpret, understand, and plan his life experiences so as not only to avoid those conditions which may lead to impairment or breakdown, but to become a positive and productive individual. Counseling is more than advice giving, and it is more than immediate resolution of the problems. It is concerned with attitudes and long-range planning. It is more concerned with cause than symptom. Counseling must be more enduring. In this respect, it requires more time and planning than does advisement or information giving. Effective counseling requires more time and planning than does advisement or information giving. Effective counseling requires skill and artistry on the part of the counselor. Furthermore, there is no substitute for personal warmth and understanding in the counseling situation. Since counseling addresses a wide range of issues and problems, it should be highly flexible to be effective. Individual differences can also contribute to the range of issues to be addressed by counseling. For instance, the problems faced by a non-reader kid will be certainly different from that of high school level student who has seriously difficulty in making a decision regarding career choices. Both of these problems will be different from that of the college-going teenager who has financial difficulty. Socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds can also throw a host of problems into counseling process. It is not always the school's responsibility to provide counseling. There will be many players in the field who can act as alternate sources of counseling. This can also bring multiplicity of practices. It is apparent that many other people other than the qualified counselor will be involved in the counseling program. All these different efforts must be integrated if optimum development of the individual is to take place. All these factors suggest the need for extremely high level of flexibility in the process of counseling. It is essential that all school personnel should be at least conversant with the basic principles of counseling. All of them won't be counselors, but they can contribute significantly to the process if they are familiar with the broader goal of counseling. Another major determinant of the success or failure of counseling is the personal effectiveness of counselor. It is he who can facilitate or inhibit counseling. It is implied that he should be a person of stability, flexibility, and understanding. He needs to be, however, objective in evaluating a situation. To do this, the counselor should have had a broad background of experience in social relationships as well as to be informed with respect to personal, educational, and occupational data. The counselor should be a mixture of scientist and artist. He will be able to blend logic and reason with creativity and intuition. He would be equally at ease with facts and fancy, since he is dealing with human minds which are capable of making thoughts that are uncanny and actions that are bizarre. He would possess an alert mind which can pick up cues from the counseling interaction that will facilitate counseling process. He must be sympathetic without coddling the client. He needs to be objective with another person's subjective feelings, but he is supposed to do this in an empathetic way. Being objective does not mean being blind to human emotions. On the other hand, it is the ability to gauge the expressed and experienced emotions and the discrepancies between them. In the counseling relationship, clients often come to depend upon the counselor to an unwholesome degree. Counseling must lead to increased self-confidence on the part of the client. An ideal counselor never crosses the boundary of the counseling relationship and uses the power bestowed upon him to exploit his decision-making capacities. He will always foster any move from the part of the client to make decisions and respond actively to the environment. The primary goals of counseling is to help a person ascertain, accept, understand, and apply the facts about himself or herself. Counseling is only a means of achieving these goals, but this means requires careful planning and preparation. The client's individuality needs to be respected, and this can be done through making him or her an active agent in the counseling. Transparency in the counseling process is another factor that can contribute to the efficacy of the process. The counselor should not hide or keep control over the information or interpretations. Instead, it should be shared in a thoughtful way so that the client can benefit from it. Counseling relationship must be punctuated by mutual respect and sincerity. It has been observed that counseling process can be viewed as an experiment on equality. The counselor should feel genuine regard for the client and should be able to respect the person as someone equal to him or her. Then only a counselor must be able to achieve the goals of counseling that makes a person fully functional. Let me summarize the main ideas in the session. Counseling is a caregiving practice which has many overlapping boundaries with other similar caregiving services. There are many misconceptions around this service that interfere with the effective utilization of it, and such misconceptions are highly unproductive. The present chapter tries to juxtapose counseling with other practices such as an interview, advisement, psychotherapy, and teaching, and tries to engage with the points of drawing and departure. The main source of misunderstanding is the similarity in elements involved in all these services. The structure and goals of these services looks similar on a first glance, but a deeper engagement which is provided in the chapter helps understand the differences. The last section tries to foreground the differences through an in-depth engagement with counseling and its goals and functions. Hope that you can answer these questions. What is the primary goal of counseling? Why counseling is mistakenly understood as other caregiving practices? Differentiate between interview and counseling. Differentiate between counseling and psychotherapy. Differentiate between teaching and counseling. For further reading and understanding, you can go through these books. Guidance in Today's School by Mortson, G. Donald and Schimmeler Ellen, published by John Wiley and Sons, New York. Guidance in Classroom by Strange Roth and Maurice Klein, published by Macmillan Limited, London. Thank you for watching this program. We can meet again with another topic. Till then, take care.